The sun hung low over Sicily that afternoon. July 2nd, 1943, the air smelled like dust and aviation fuel. And high above Castelvetrano airfield, a German pilot was about to learn something his commanders told him was impossible. He never saw it coming. The P-40 Warhawk dropped out of the sun like a falcon. Machine gun fire ripped through sheet metal. Pieces of fuselage peeled away in the slipstream. The Focke-Wulf 190 rolled hard left, smoke trailing black against the Mediterranean blue before it began that long terminal spiral toward the Sicilian hills below. First Lieutenant Charles B. Hall, 22 years old, from Brazil, Indiana, pulled his stick back and climbed. His hands were steady. His breathing was calm. And on the side of his P-40, he would soon paint a black swastika, the first of what would become 112 enemy aircraft destroyed by men the Germans would come to fear as the Schwarzwagelmenschen, the black Birdmen. In Nazi Germany, the doctrine was clear. Racial science had declared it. Black people were classified as Untermenschen, subhuman, incapable of mastering complex machinery, too primitive for the precision of aerial combat. The Nuremberg laws forbade German citizens from even marrying anyone of African descent. The Reich's entire ideology rested on a foundation of supposed genetic superiority, and yet, here in the skies over the Mediterranean, that ideology was about to shatter against cold, hard reality. 992 trained pilots from Tuskegee, Alabama were coming. And they were about to prove that courage, skill, and precision have no color at all. What the Luftwaffe didn't know in the summer of 1943, as they climbed to intercept American bomber formations, was that they were about to face some of the most highly trained, rigorously prepared, and deeply motivated fighter pilots in the entire United States Army Air Forces. These weren't just soldiers. They were men who had overcome obstacles their white counterparts never even imagined. Men who had trained longer, flown harder, studied deeper. Men who carried into battle not just the weight of national duty, but the crushing burden of proving an entire race's worth to a world that doubted them at every turn. Mathematics of war would soon be written across European skies in fire and steel. 15,000 combat sorties, 1,578 missions, 112 confirmed aerial victories, and a bomber loss rate so low that crews would literally beg to have these pilots as their escorts. Statistics that would force even the most fanatical Nazi ideologues to confront the bankruptcy of their so-called science. But this story doesn't begin in the clouds over Germany. It begins on the ground, in the hostile, segregated heart of America itself. In 1925, the United States Army War College published an official report. Its title was Bureaucratic and Cold: Employment of Negro Manpower in War. Its conclusions were anything but neutral. The report stated, plainly and without apology, that compared to white men, Black Americans were admittedly of inferior mentality and inherently weak in character. This wasn't fringe thinking. This was official United States military doctrine. It claimed that black soldiers lacked the intelligence for technical roles, lacked the courage for leadership, lacked the capacity for complex thought under pressure. And yet, even as military brass clung to these lies, a handful of black Americans were already proving them catastrophically wrong. Eugene Bullard had flown combat missions for France in World War I, not because he lacked the skill to fly for America, but because America refused to let him serve. Bessie Coleman earned her pilot's license in France in 1921. She became the first black woman to hold one anywhere in the world. Not because American flight schools didn't exist, but because not a single one would accept her. By the 1930s, the Coffee School of Aeronautics in Chicago had trained dozens of black civilian pilots. Men and women who could loop, roll, and navigate by instruments as well as anyone in the sky. They proved, quietly but undeniably, that flying skill knew no racial boundaries whatsoever. The pressure for change built slowly. Like storm clouds gathering on a distant horizon, civil rights leaders hammered at the gates. Walter White of the NAACP, labor leader of Philip Randolph, Judge William H. Hastie, they lobbied. They wrote letters. They demanded answers. Black newspapers, the Chicago Defender, the Pittsburgh Courier, the Baltimore Afro-American. They asked the same question over and over until it became impossible to ignore. How can America fight for democracy abroad while denying it at home? On April 3, 1939, a small crack appeared in the wall. Public Law 18, Senator Harry H. Schwartz had slipped an amendment into the civilian pilot training program. It required the program to include one or more schools designated by the Civil Aeronautics Authority for the training of any Negro air pilot. It was a grudging concession, wrapped in segregation, buried in bureaucracy. But it was a beginning, and when Franklin Roosevelt ran for an unprecedented third term in 1940, he needed black votes in key northern cities. The political calculus was clear. Change was coming, whether the military wanted it or not. On January 16, 1941, Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson made the announcement: the formation of the 99th Pursuit Squadron, an all-black flying unit. But the announcement came with a caveat, a warning that revealed exactly what the military expected. This would be an experiment, a test to see if black men could even be trained as combat pilots. The implication was clear. They expected failure. Captain Benjamin O. Davis Jr. understood the weight he carried when he led 26 pilots of the 99th Fighter Squadron to North Africa in April 1943. He was the son of America's first black general. At West Point, he had endured 4 years of what the Academy called silencing. No white cadet would speak to him outside of official duties. 4 years of eating alone, studying alone, walking the grounds in complete social isolation. And now he commanded men who carried not just their own hopes, but the dreams of 13 million black Americans watching from home. The 99th arrived at Farjuna, Tunisia, and was attached to the 33rd Fighter Group. Their new commander was Colonel William W. Mamier, a man who made no secret of his skepticism about black pilots. Mamier assigned them patrol missions over the Mediterranean, milk runs, reconnaissance flights, keeping them away from the real action, away from the actual war. He wanted them to fail. And when they didn't immediately rack up victories, he thought he had his proof. The morning of June 2, 1943 marked their first real taste of combat. An attack on the Italian-held island of Pantelleria. As their aging P-40 Warhawks climbed toward the target, German fighters suddenly appeared out of the sun. The Tuskegee pilots held formation. They stayed with their bombers, protected them. No aircraft were lost on either side that day. But the Germans had learned something important. These pilots didn't break under pressure, but it was July 2nd that changed everything. Charles Hall was flying his 8th mission, escorting B-25 Mitchell bombers, attacking Castelvetrano airfield in Sicily. The bombers dropped their payload. Black smoke rose from the runway below. And then 2 Focke-Wulf 190s came screaming down on the formation. Hall later described it in his after-action report. His words were measured, professional. I saw 2 Focke-Wulfs following the bombers just after the bombs were dropped. I headed for the space between the fighters and the bombers. Managed to turn inside the Jerry's turn radius. I fired a long burst. Saw my tracers penetrate the second aircraft. He was turning left, but he suddenly fell off, headed straight into the ground. When Hall's wheels touched down back at base, the entire airfield erupted. Black ground crews who had endured months of insults, Months of being told they weren't good enough. Months of watching their pilots be dismissed and doubted. They finally had their answer to every slight, every insult, every doubt. Hall's victory was the first aerial kill by a Black American pilot in United States military history. The swastika he painted on his plane that afternoon wasn't just a kill marking. It was a statement, but Colonel Mamier wasn't convinced. By January 1944, the 99th had been in combat for 7 months, and Mamier filed a report that could have ended everything. He claimed they lacked aggressiveness, lacked the killer instinct. He recommended their immediate removal from combat operations. The report climbed the chain of command. It reached General Henry "Hop" Arnold, the man who could shut down the entire Tuskegee program. With a single signature, he prepared to do exactly that. And then came Anzio, January 27, 1944. Luftwaffe launched massive raids on Allied forces. Pinned down on the Anzio beachhead, wave after wave of German fighters and bombers. The sky was thick with aircraft. Tracers crisscrossed like deadly fireworks. 15 pilots of the 99th, flying their obsolete P-40s, encountered superior Focke-Wulf 190s. Over the battlefield. What happened next silenced every critic forever. The 99th tore into the German formations like wolves. The exact number varies in different reports. 8 kills, 13 kills. Sources disagree. But what's not in dispute is this. In 2 days of savage combat, flying inferior equipment, they destroyed more enemy aircraft than they had in their previous 7 months combined. Captain Charles Hall claimed 2 more victories. His total now stood at 3. The War Department launched an immediate investigation. They compared the 99th's performance with other P-40 squadrons in the theater. White squadrons. The conclusion was unavoidable. They were performing just as well. In some metrics, better. The success at Anzio proved what should have been obvious from the beginning. Black pilots could excel in combat. All they needed was the opportunity. In May 1944, the 332nd Fighter Group received orders that would transform them from outcasts to legends. The group combined the 99th, 100th, 301st, and 302nd Fighter Squadrons. 4 squadrons of black pilots. And they were being assigned to the 15th Air Force, Flying Bomber Escort. Deep penetration missions into the heart of Nazi Germany. The longest, most dangerous missions of the entire war. Colonel Benjamin Davis gathered his pilots at Rainey-Telly Airfield. The base sat on Italy's Adriatic coast. The wind came off the sea cold and salty. Davis looked at the faces of his men and gave them their mission. We cannot afford to lose bombers. Our job is not to be aces. Our job is to bring those bombers home. Stay with the bombers. No matter what, that directive would define everything they did. Every decision. Every engagement. It would become their identity. In June 1944, General Nathan Twining ordered a new identification system. Each fighter group would receive distinctive markings. Instant visual recognition in the chaos of combat. The 332nd was assigned red. Not just red noses. Not just red bands. Entire tail sections painted crimson red. Propellers spinners. Nose bands. Everything. The P-51 Mustangs with their brilliant red tails became impossible to miss against the sky. And the first bomber crews to receive red tail escorts didn't know their protectors were black. They didn't care. They only knew one thing. These fighters stayed close. They never abandoned the formation for easy kills. They never peeled off chasing glory. Word spread through the bomber groups like wildfire. Request the red tails if you can get them. July 18, 1944 tested the red tails like they'd never been tested before. Colonel Davis led 66. Mustangs to rendezvous with bombers targeting the Luftwaffe base at Memmingen, Germany, deep in enemy territory. But the bombers were late. Davis made a decision. They would orbit, wait, burn precious fuel in enemy airspace rather than turn back. When the bombers finally appeared on the horizon, so did the Luftwaffe. Approximately 100 German fighters, attacking from multiple directions. A coordinated assault designed to overwhelm the escort and slaughter the bombers. The Germans had learned. Numbers might break the Red Tail's protective screen. The fight lasted 20 minutes. It was savage, brutal, the sky filled with tracers and burning aircraft. The Red Tails claimed 11 to 12 victories. But despite their fierce defense, 15 B-17s fell to enemy fighters. The 332nd lost 3 pilots that day. Lieutenants Robert Hutton, Wellington Irving, and Alfred Brown. Their names would be added to the growing list of men who would never come home. Critics immediately seized on the bomber losses. See, they can't handle major battles, but operational analysis revealed the truth. The 332nd had arrived at an impossible situation. Massive German forces already engaging the bombers. The Red Tails hadn't caused a disaster. They had prevented complete annihilation. By March 1945, the Luftwaffe's conventional fighters could barely challenge Allied air supremacy. The war in the air was essentially won. But Germany had one final card to play. The Messerschmitt Me 262, the world's first operational jet fighter. Top speed, 540 miles per hour. It could outrun any propeller-driven aircraft in the sky. Could strike and vanish before anyone could react. It was the future of aerial combat. And the Allies were still flying machines designed in the 1930s. March 24, 1945, the 332nd Fighter Group received its most challenging assignment yet. Escort bombers 1,600 miles round trip, all the way to Berlin, to attack the Daimler-Benz tank factory in the heart of the Reich. Intelligence warned them. Me-262s from Jagdgeschwader 7 would defend the target. The largest concentration of jet fighters ever assembled for a single interception. Colonel Davis led 43 P-51 Mustangs into the teeth of the beast. As they approached Berlin, the jets appeared. Silver streaks cutting through the sky faster than anything the American pilots had ever seen. The roar of their engines was different, higher pitched, almost like a scream. But Lieutenant Roscoe Brown had studied the Me-262's weaknesses. He knew its secrets. "We knew the German jets were faster than we were," he later explained. "Instead of going directly after them, we went away from them, then turned into their blind spots." Brown got behind one, lined up his shot. The jet pilot never saw him coming. "I pulled up at him in a 15-degree climb," Brown reported. "Fired 3 long bursts from 2,000 feet at 8 o'clock to him. Almost immediately, the pilot bailed out. About 24,500 feet. One jet down, Lieutenant Earl Lane did what many considered impossible. He shot down an Me-262 with a 2,000-yard deflection shot, using the new K-14 computing gun sight, leading the target, calculating speed and trajectory in a fraction of a second. The jet exploded in midair." Lieutenant Charles Brantley claimed the 3rd jet victory that day. 3 Me-262s destroyed in a single engagement, more than most fighter groups destroyed in the entire war. The Red Tails had just exceeded the total of all previous American Me-262 kills. In one afternoon. The 332nd Fighter Group earned a Distinguished Unit Citation for that mission. The words on the citation were simple, but they meant everything. Not all encounters between Tuskegee Airmen and Germans ended in victory. 32 pilots became prisoners of war. Their experiences revealed something unexpected, something that complicated the simple narrative of Nazi racism. Lieutenant Alexander Jefferson was shot down on August 12, 1944, his 19th mission. Strafe-in radar installations over southern France. Flak tore through his P-51's wing. The engine seized. He rode the crippled aircraft down and bailed out over enemy territory. At his interrogation, the German officer shocked him. The man had extensive intelligence on the 332nd Fighter Group. He knew about Ramitelli Airfield, Jefferson recalled years later. About our squadron commanders. Even details about my parents' home in Detroit. My father was a teacher. He knew that. He knew my mother's maiden name. Their intelligence was frighteningly thorough. Inside Stalag Luft 3, Jefferson found himself treated like any other American officer. White pows from bomber crews often approached him. They recognized the red tail insignia. They wanted to thank him. These interactions, impossible in segregated America, occurred naturally in a German prison camp that the irony wasn't lost on Jefferson. Here I was in a Nazi POW camp, being treated more equally by white Americans than I would be back home. When the war ended and Jefferson returned to the United States, he was immediately segregated at the disembarkation point. White prisoners went one way. Black prisoners went another. Welcome home. While German pilots reportedly acknowledged the red tail skill with the nickname Schwarzvogelmännchen, American bomber crews became their most vocal champions. These men faced death on every mission. They didn't care about race. They cared about survival. Bomber crews developed their own mythology about the red tails. Stories spread through the squadrons about their distinctive flying style, the way they waggled their wings in greeting, their tight formations, their absolute refusal to abandon damaged bombers even when they were burning and falling out of the sky. Red tail angels, the bomber crews called them, and the statistics supported it. Research by Air Force historian Dr. Daniel Hallman revealed something remarkable. Bombers under 332nd Fighter Group escort lost only 27 aircraft to enemy fighters, compared to an average of 46 for other P-51 groups in the 5th Air Force. The superior protection rate occurred despite the red tails flying some of the longest and most dangerous missions of the entire war. By war's end, the numbers told a story that couldn't be denied. 1,578 combat missions flown, over 15,000 individual sorties completed, 179 bomber escort missions, 311 total missions for the 5th Air Force. Enemy aircraft destroyed, 112 in aerial combat, 150 destroyed on the ground. 3 Mi-262 jet fighters shot down on March 24, 1945. Ground targets destroyed, 950 rail cars, trucks and motor vehicles, 254 locomotive engines. The former Italian destroyer Giuseppe Miraglia damaged beyond repair on June 25, 1944. Protection record: 27 bombers lost to enemy fighters versus 46 average for comparable groups. Superior protection maintained across 179 escort missions, individual achievements that became legend. Lee Archer, 4 confirmed victories. Joseph Ellsbury, 4 victories, including 3 Focke-Wulf 190s on July 12, 1944. Edward Toppins, 4 victories. Clarence Lester, 3 kills in a single mission. July 18, 1944. Decorations earned: 96 Distinguished Flying Crosses awarded to 332nd Fighter Group pilots, 744 Air Medals, 14 Bronze Stars, 8 Purple Hearts, 3 Distinguished Unit Citations for the 99th Fighter Squadron, 1 Distinguished Unit Citation for the 332nd Fighter Group. And the human cost. Always the human cost: 66 pilots killed in action, 32 captured as prisoners of war, 84 killed in training and non-combat missions. The transformation from mockery to respect wasn't just about raw courage. It reflected something deeper: superior training, technological advantage, and the precision with which the Red Tails wielded both. At Tuskegee, pilots logged more flight hours than their white counterparts. 300 hours compared to 200 for white cadets. They practiced formation flying obsessively, over and over until it became instinct. They knew that in combat, discipline would be their edge. The washout rate at Tuskegee was 60%, compared to 40% for white cadets. Only the very best survived the program. Colonel Noel Parrish, the Tuskegee commander, called them super selected. The progression through aircraft types told its own story. The 99th began with hand-me-down P-40 Warhawks, already obsolete when they arrived in North Africa. These liquid-cooled Allison engine fighters were inferior to German Bf-109s and FW-190s in almost every performance metric: speed, climb rate, ceiling. But the Tuskegee pilots used what advantages the P-40 had: superior turning ability, rugged construction. They learned to exploit every strength and minimize every weakness. The arrival of P-51 Mustangs in July 1944 changed everything. It transformed the Red Tails into equals of any fighter unit in the war. The North American P-51D Mustang represented American industrial perfection. Its Packard-built Merlin engine produced over 1,400 horsepower. Top speed, 437 miles per hour. 6.50 caliber machine guns that could shred any aircraft in the sky. And most importantly, range. Over 1,600 miles with drop tanks. Enough to escort bombers anywhere in the Reich and bring them home. But behind every pilot who shot down a German aircraft stood dozens of unsung heroes. Mechanics, armorers, crew chiefs. The men who kept the Red Tails flying. Of the approximately 16,000 Tuskegee Airmen who served, fewer than 1,000 were pilots. The rest were ground personnel who made victory possible. These crews worked miracles with limited resources. Ramatelli Airfield in Italy was primitive compared to other American bases. Tents instead of barracks. Mud instead of concrete. Spare parts were chronically scarce. The 332nd was often last in line for supplies. Yet their aircraft availability rate, the percentage of planes ready for combat, equaled or exceeded that of white units. These ground crews also faced combat. German raids on Ramatelli were rare but deadly. On March 24, 1944, a bombing raid killed several support personnel. The men continued working through the attack, pulling aircraft away from burning fuel dumps, saving what they could while bombs fell around them. The strategic bombing campaign over Europe provided the ultimate testing ground. Each B-17 Flying Fortress cost $238,000. Each one carried 10 highly trained crew members. The loss of a single bomber represented a strategic setback that rippled through the entire war effort. This is why bomber protection mattered more than aerial victories. Colonel Davis understood this when he ordered his pilots to resist the natural temptation to chase German fighters. Anyone can shoot down a fighter if they abandon their post, he told them. It takes discipline to stay with the bombers when the enemy is running. The Red Tails' escort tactics evolved through hard experience. They developed a 3-layer defense. Close escort weaving directly above the bombers. Medium escort positioned to intercept incoming fighters. High escort watching for diving attacks from above. This system required precise coordination, absolute discipline. Radio communication had to be perfect. Formation flying had to be flawless. One mistake and bombers died. The Tuskegee Airmen fought 2 wars simultaneously. Against fascism abroad and against racism at home. Their combat record challenged both Nazi racial ideology and American segregation. It proved that excellence in aerial combat transcended racial categorization entirely. While they fought Germans over Europe, they battled prejudice back home. Their victories made headlines in black newspapers: the Pittsburgh Courier, the Chicago Defender, the Baltimore Afro-American, but mainstream white press often minimized or ignored their achievements entirely. The Pittsburgh Courier's Double V campaign, victory against fascism abroad and racism at home, used the Tuskegee Airmen as prime examples. Look what Black Americans can achieve when given the chance. The contrast with German awareness was stark. By 1945, the Luftwaffe reportedly knew exactly who flew the red-tailed Mustangs. They had a name for them: Schwarzvogel MENSCHEN. Meanwhile, many white Americans didn't even know black pilots existed. This ignorance was deliberate. The War Department rarely publicized the Tuskegee Airmen's successes. Their victories didn't fit the narrative. Victory in Europe brought not celebration, but uncertainty, while white units prepared for victory parades and ticker tape celebrations. The 332nd faced questions about their future. The Army Air Forces planned to maintain segregation, despite overwhelming combat evidence of its absurdity. For decades after World War II, the achievements of the Tuskegee Airmen remained largely unknown to mainstream America. Individual pilots struggled with this erasure. Lee Archer, with his 4 confirmed victories, worked as an executive, but he rarely spoke about his war record. "Nobody believed me anyway," he later said. "A black fighter pilot? They figured I must be lying." In 1948, President Harry Truman signed Executive Order 9981, integrating the United States military. The decision was influenced directly by the Tuskegee Airmen's combat performance. Benjamin Davis, who had led the Red Tails over Berlin, became the Air Force's first black general in 1954. Recognition came slowly, painfully slowly. In 2007, President George W. Bush awarded the Congressional Gold Medal to the Tuskegee Airmen, the nation's highest civilian honor. Only 300 of the original pilots survived to attend the ceremony. Many had waited over 60 years for national recognition. The transformation from mockery to respect wasn't mythology. It was documented fact, written in logbooks and after-action reports and combat film. The numbers remain irrefutable. 112 aerial victories against the Luftwaffe. 3 Me-262 jet fighters destroyed in one mission. 150 enemy aircraft destroyed on the ground. 20-7 bombers lost versus 46 average for other groups. 96 distinguished flying crosses earned by 332nd Fighter Group pilots. The nickname Schwarzvogelmenschen, the Black Birdmen, proved something fundamental. Prejudice crumbles when confronted with undeniable capability. Every German fighter destroyed, every bomber protected, every mission completed. It all added evidence to an irrefutable case. The color of a pilot's skin had absolutely nothing to do with his ability to fly and fight. Roscoe Brown, who shot down that German jet over Berlin, summarized their achievement years later. His words were simple, powerful. "We didn't just fight the Germans. We fought ignorance, prejudice, and hatred. And we won all 3 battles." The Tuskegee Airmen hadn't just won battles. They had changed history itself. They fought 3 wars simultaneously, defeating the Luftwaffe in combat, challenging Nazi racial ideology through performance, and eventually helping demolish American segregation through undeniable excellence. The Red Tail Angels proved something the world desperately needed to learn. When given the opportunity, when the chains of prejudice were finally broken, they didn't just succeed, they soared. And in soaring, they transformed mockery into respect, prejudice into acceptance, doubt into awe. They forced enemies to become witnesses to their extraordinary achievement. The sky knows no color, only courage. And on that truth, the Tuskegee Airmen wrote their names across history in letters of fire.